You need that, and I need a light. And folks, we know that I need a light. I will have a light. It's just a lot going on down here because of Ian, but we understand, and it's going to happen.
Yep, it will. Welcome to Rebel's Edge, folks. We appreciate you joining us. Obviously, any retweets or shares you can do are wonderful. We are streaming on Twitter, on Market Rebellion's website, as well as YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, for instance, you can click into the search bar, Market Rebellion, search us, and you can then subscribe. It's completely free. There are almost 30, let me see, there's 2,970 videos up there that we have done. And they're everything from education to shows like this. And if you go to YouTube, and again, you subscribe, it is free. You can watch any of those videos anytime. So with that said, Pete, let's dive into 1 minute macro. My part of that will be that I think Harker, one of the members of the Fed, really with some aggressive comments. And as soon as he said those, Pete, like, hey, we're going to need a lot more effort to curb this inflation. Well, bang, market turned and went south, gave up all the gains.
Well, and I totally agree with you, John. I'd also say on top of that, we had the dollar all the way up to 113. It pulled back significantly, and that has been just an unbelievable tell. Also, add to that the 10-year very comfortably over 4. You combine those two things, and you've got yourself a very interesting couple of things that you can watch. One of them being the inverse, correlation with the dollar. It was 113. It went all the way down to 112.25, something like that, John. And now it's back up towards 1265. So gives you a little bit of an idea of how close those things are all working together. And I think you're right, though. I think that commentary certainly did contribute to what was a 300-400 point rally to the upside. Yeah. And then suddenly it was, it's almost poof, gone.
Yep. Well, we're going to now dive into at&t, Pete. Whether or not the iPhone or anticipation of the iPhone coming out caused people to stick with their carrier. at&t beat, basically coming up with revenue that was above expectations, which means, of course, to the consumers, at least those that can afford the bigger plans, they're still fine. They haven't started dropping off yet. So that was one of the reasons we popped initially. And then we sort of have given back a lot of that, Pete.
Well, John, and they raised the forecast. They're talking about their profits. They were also talking about their free cash flow. One thing that you and I have always tried to explain to people is you do not use as your number one factor when you're looking at stocks what the dividend yields are. That goes way, way, way down somewhere, but it's not in the top 3 or 4 things that you're looking for. This is a stock that started the year at 20. It got up as high as a little over 21. And now here it is on a big up day. It got into the 16s. That gives you a little bit of an idea of the performance of this company. But some of the numbers did look pretty impressive. They were talking about that free cash flow. They were very excited about that, what that can happen with debt and everything else. But I think the reality is, John, when I look at the amount of debt that they've got, and they're talking about taking a dent into $162 billion in debt, I think there's other places that I'd be looking right now.
Yeah, and that dividend yield that Pete's talking about, folks, is 7% plus. So that's a big dividend yield. So it's tempting. But yeah, it's not a top pick for me either, Pete. All right, let's talk about Allstate. Something near and dear to Pete's heart. Maybe not because he's insured with Allstate, but certainly the property damage other than flooding, because a lot of people don't understand it. But flooding, which occurs on these hurricanes, unfortunately, is usually just a federal government program, not part of Allstate and so forth and their coverage. But Pete, they basically were getting tanked because they were taking a bigger than expected charge already. And if it ends up being less than that, they can take that in as a gain. But if it ends up being more than that, Pete, that's what people are worried about right now, because that was a devastating storm.
Yeah, Ian, $750 million are the estimates, John, and then add another $125 million to that if you want to talk about inflation and what that has to do with things. Also, there's just a lot going on, John, with Allstate and all the claims, and it's autos as well as homes. So there's a lot to go over here, and down 11% or whatever it is right now. But I saw it last I looked, it was down about 11, 12%. This is a stock that, you know what, you can understand why it's getting punished, because this is one of those where those claims, who knows what those numbers truly will end up being. And that is a reason enough. If you're not there, I would definitely stay back and wait, and let's try to figure things out before you want to jump in there just because it's down 11, 12%. It might go down even more potentially with more bad news maybe down the pipe.
Yep, I agree. I think for both of us on this one, then Pete, we're on a hold. We're not on a buy or a sell, but
Right.
we're on a hold on that one.
Yeah.
All right. What about Datadog? This one was up double digits, 10%, Pete. The 52-week range was $74 all the way up to 200. It's a security platform. We know that. They help people do things in the cloud rather than having a bunch of servers. We kind of know that. But it's given back almost all of that right now, Pete. I mean, it's down from like 86.5 or $87 to 83 just in the last hour and a half. So that's a pretty big turnaround.
It is a huge turnaround. And John, you know, they do have great free cash flow. We love that side of things. But as far as making money, yeah, they make a little bit here and there, but it's not, you know, we're talking about a forward PE of at least 80. And if you want to go back and go a little bit further and say, well, what was some of the previous, we're talking about in the thousands. So, you know, when you and I were talking about these stocks many, many times over the last, you know, through the pandemic, these are those names that are high growth. That's great. But man, they've got to make money. And that's the pressure. That's where you've got to absolutely show us that you can make the money. And that's why I think you're seeing a stock like this one and many others in this same sort of category that are just getting punished because people have to have companies that have great balance sheets. We're not looking at great balance sheets here, but we do like what the growth looks like. We like what the free cash flow looks like. So when it gets down a little bit further than this, which I think it will, I think maybe there will be opportunities, but it hasn't hit yet.
Yeah, I joined Pete on that. I might be a little more aggressive about trying to grab some because that
was up even higher, than it started to fall back. Talking about super micro, John, they got cash to debt though that's not so great. That's about minus 400 million. So that's a little bit of an issue. But when you look at this one from a fundamental perspective, we're talking about PEs that actually look pretty daggone nice. They look pretty low. We're talking about 10, 11, somewhere in there, John. So there's a lot to unpack here. But when you look at a company that raised guidance and raised their earnings, when they're talking about the earnings, they're talking about the sales, both were raised. There's a lot of positives that are coming out of this report. And I think that this is one that I'm pretty intrigued by because there's a lot of different elements to this company, John, that we don't normally see. And now that we got the opportunity to get there and see that and see what they're able to project for the future, I think this is a company that actually might still have a little bit left, maybe a little bit more fuel in the tank. What say you?
I would agree. If you can hear me okay now, Pete, I'd say I like it. I like SMCI. I like the volatility pattern of the stock because this isn't one that's had as many of the wild swings. Right. So I am with you. It's a $3 billion player in the market. I liked what the guidance was. So yeah, I'd be one of those folks who would be accumulating at right around these levels. Pete, I've got an unusual, before I do unusual activity, I think we've got an ad for the December conference, right, Pete?
Yep, let's get after it. Miami, baby.
Introducing our new series of intimate in-person trading conferences in some of the greatest cities in America. It's Market Rebellion Live. First up, this December in Miami. Level up your trading with help from Pete Najarian, AJ Monte, Ryan Mastro, and Bill Johnson. Miami is limited to just 25 seats to ensure every guest gets personal attention. So act now. Tickets are going fast.
Bang. Love that, Pete. December 8th through the 10th, live trading. Nothing like it, folks. You know, people that are like you that are putting their money on the line every day when they're trading and or investing, learning some great strategies from our educators, speaking to like-minded investors in a very intimate setting because it's only limited to 25. Check it out at Market Rebellion. I think this event, and you can always find our events where we're going to be speaking and so forth under that category, events. And you can sign up now. When they're gone, they're gone. They won't let us have more than 25 people in this location, folks. So please sign up now. All right, Pete, let's talk about Petrobras. As the name implies, petro would be fuel, at least in some languages. And this is a Brazilian energy company, one of the biggies out there in terms of overall production. The problem with Brazil generally, Pete, is it's usually deep water drilling, but this is a $15 stock. Somebody steps up, buys 10,000 of the 1550 calls that expire next week. So not tomorrow, not the 21st, but the 28th of October. So if you're a bull and you trade stock, you would buy the stock. If you're an options trader, you might buy a spread, for instance, buying 15 calls, selling 16s or higher, something like that, because this is predicting a little pop out of crude oil and out of PBR into next week, Pete.
All right, John, I'm going to jump right on this one as well. Carvana. This is an interesting one. It's a very volatile company, trading right around 15 bucks. It's been absolutely slaughtered. There is a huge short interest in this name, about 30% short interest. So can it maybe be like some of these other meme stocks, John, where all of a sudden it gets a little bit of a pop? That's what I think whenever we see some of the options activity, which we have seen in this name, that's what I'm always kind of hanging on to. Will there be a little bit of that pop once in a while? You've got to be disciplined, because if you're there for it, it might not last all that long. But today we had a buyer of 2,500 of the November 4th expiring 18 calls. Stocks trading right around 15 bucks. Why is that interesting? Well, with the stock at 15 bucks, they're buying the 18s. They're also hedging that by selling twice as many calls to the upside. We're not going to go there because that's a little bit more of an advanced trade. So we'll just stick with they're buying the November 18 calls. Why would they do that? Well, there's earnings on November 3rd as well. Those calls are going for about $1.50, John. I like these kind of trades. I actually shifted down and put on about a $4 or $5 spread. I like what I was doing there because it's costing me about $1, and the risk reward is something that actually fits in the parameters that I'm always looking for. I always want to have multiples. I'm getting those multiples. It's about a multiple of 4 because I did a $4 spread, and that way I'm able to be in there for $1. I could get as lucky as to get up to 4, but most likely it's going to be something before that. If it pops, that I'll sell right out of this thing.
Very good. Understand, Pete, and I like the description of how you would trade it. All right, let's dive into a little bit of sports, Pete. This is always a segment that so many viewers love because of your insights and the fact that Pete played 6 years in the NFL, folks. So take it away, Pete. I imagine we're talking football.
We are, John. It's football season, man. Forget all this other crap, baseball and everything. They got another 162 games, whatever it is. I mean, basketball's got their 82 game, whatever. But I'm just joking, of course. But with the NFL, how about an early look, John, at some of the MVP potential candidates out there? The obvious ones everybody's going to talk about. I'm going to look at Josh Allen. I'm going to look at Patrick Mahomes. Both of them have 17 touchdowns. They both only have 4 interceptions. That's great. Justin Herbert, he started off great. Kirk Cousins is looking pretty good with just 1 loss. He's playing very well. His interceptions all came early. He's been very, very competent since and actually doing a really great job. Joe Burrow, sort of the same story. He started to have a few more touchdowns. He's got 12 touchdowns now as well, doing a great job. But how about this? What if it's finally not a quarterback, John? What if it's Saquon Barkley? Now, why do I say his name? Well, we were talking about the shockers. How about the New York Giants being 5-1? How did they get to that point? Well, the quarterback's been okay at best, but you've got a running back that everybody loved a few years ago. Then he got hurt. He does an unbelievable job. He's got over 600 yards, John. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry, and he's the number 2 guy on the team with 21 receptions out of the backfield for another 155 yards. This guy is very impressive. I love everything about him. He's jumped back from a bad injury. I think he could be sort of a dark horse for us, John, in terms of the MVP candidates, at least in the first half of the year. Not quite the first half, but we're getting pretty close. What do you think?
I'd absolutely say so, Pete, because I've watched that guy when he was at Penn State, Pete.
Yeah.
And I watched him power clean. I wasn't there, folks. I watched it on video, but I watched him power clean like 425 for a running back to be able to do basically double body weight on a power clean, Pete. Yeah, I'm impressed. But there are lots of people that can lift weights that can't run and lead like Saquon Barkley has been doing. But he's both. He's a really strong kid, and he just has a motor. So I love this guy. I think he's one of the best in football right now.
All right, we're going to get a little college football as well, John. There are three primary games this week that I think absolutely stand out. One of them could end up in a blowout. And I'm talking about Syracuse and Clemson. And here's why. Syracuse is 6-0. Who has Syracuse played and who have they beat? And were they healthy when they played them? Nobody. But that's not their fault. It is what the scheduling is. But they are 6-0. They got to go down to Clemson. That is not a fun place to have to go play. Clemson looks as good as they ever have, John. I think that's going to be a really great game. The defense for Syracuse has been the strong point. I don't know necessarily they're going to be strong against Clemson. If they do, I'll tell you what, I'll have to eat my words because I think Clemson might blow these poor guys out. The second game that I've got for you, and I think it's a fun one, how about Ole Miss? Number 7 in the country. They're playing LSU. You're familiar with that part of the Louisiana world of football. And I'll tell you what, they play some great football. LSU is playing better now than they started off. Everybody was a little bit, just wondering what was going on when they've lost games early on. There's a kid who plays for Ole Miss named Quinshawn Junkins. We should all know that name because this kid is unbelievable. 6 yards a carry. He's already got 10 touchdowns, John. They run the ball, and then they run the ball at Ole Miss, and it's been working. So that one I think will be a lot of fun. But the most interesting one of the whole weekend, I think, is UCLA playing at Oregon, John. We're talking about Oregon, who lost in week 1 to Georgia, got absolutely decimated. All they've done is bounce back and put up unbelievable points on everybody. UCLA is undefeated, and they look like a Big Ten team. They got a bunch of guys on the offensive line who want to punch you in the mouth. They got a great quarterback. They got good runners. They've got great receivers, good tight end. It could be a big, big game up there in Oregon, John. It should be a lot of fun. Which game do you like the best, do you think?
Oh, I mean, I think the game really made for TV, Pete, is the first one you described, because you go to Death Valley when you're Syracuse and, you've got a chip on your shoulder because, of course, everybody says you're a poser. You're not really that ACC team that can knock out Clemson when they're the number 4 or 5 in the country. And I think they're going to go in there with some attitude, but I don't think attitude's enough. Death Valley, they call it that for a reason. Pete, from all the players you've played with, like Vance Hammond and some of those other guys. These fans will be rabid. Syracuse is used to noise in that dome, but they're not used to this. And it will be, I think, a very exciting game. But I'm with you. I think if Clemson just jumps on them, unless they have a lot of mistakes, and I don't anticipate that because they haven't done that this year, and under the coach, that coach doesn't put up with a lot of mistakes. I think they probably are in a good position to be the over on the game, Pete.
The last thing I'd say about that UCLA game too, John, because we're talking about number 9 going up against number 10. UCLA right now is number 9 at 6-0. They've already beat Utah, who everybody loved at the beginning of the season. They still kind of love them, but they've had a couple of losses as well. And they've already beaten Washington, who's played really good football so far this year as well. So I look at UCLA and I think, you know what? They've got everything you'd want, but they got to go on the road to Oregon, and that is not a fun place to play. And they might find themselves on the wrong side of it if they have too many turnovers. So I think it's going to be a great weekend of college football.
I agree, Pete. And all I'd do for that number 10 ranking for Oregon is maybe take a look at the Georgia game earlier this year. Enough said?
Ugly.
Ugly. All right, folks. Thank you for joining us. As always, appreciate it. Please share it with your friends, the links to this program. And if you can, then make sure you join us for 3 at 3 later today, as well as Pete's The Take, 10:30 a.m. every business day. Bang. See you then.